Hello, everyone. Dr. Christine Smith back for a really great interview today with Deborah Yager, who is the co-founder of Yager Training, and they specialize in really working with high performance entrepreneurs and healthcare providers, coaches, people just looking to change the world in a big way through good leadership. And they are also trained in neurolinguistic programming, which is a really unique and wonderful way to work with the brain. And in that, around this where they literally teach you how to reprogram your own limiting beliefs. And I wanted to bring Deb on to talk about this today because I think it's one of the things that holds people back the most in business. And they have some really interesting perspectives on it. So hello, Deb, how are you?
Hi, good morning. How are you?
Morning. I'm wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for joining me today. I was just telling everyone a little bit about you and that you helped co-found Yager Training. I'd love if you could just share a little bit about yourself and how you really fell in love with this niche of helping entrepreneurs and business owners to reprogram their beliefs to become really the best version of themselves.
Yes, thank you so much for having me on. I'm so grateful to be part of the community. So back in 2011, I'm sure you've heard the adage that your mess is your message. Well, it was for me for sure, because I was rock bottom in every single area of life. And I'm sure some of your listeners could resonate with this. I mean, I was in a career that was completely wrong for me for so many reasons. And I felt like every single day I had to lie to my nervous system just to put on the mask to be able to force myself to go into that environment in order for me to make the money to survive. And I also had a belief system, a structure, and an identity around being a girl that always attracted the wrong men. In fact, I identified with it. I even called myself a loser magnet. And I would get in and out of these terrible relationships. I would run, pack up my stuff and go from state to state, expecting to get a different result. But then I would attract the same guy, just different face, different name, but it would end up being the same emotional drama, trauma circle that I was in. And for over 16 years, I believed that I was an addict and an alcoholic. And I was numbing everything because it felt so painful to be in my body. I was so riddled with anxiety, fear, doubt, shame. In fact, I felt disgusted from what I had become. And so I hit rock bottom for the 50,000th time. I almost overdosed so many times. And I remember looking at myself one time in the mirror and realizing I didn't even know who I was. I was trapped. And whenever you're looking and you're willing to surrender, then a teacher appears. And so what happened is I ended up meeting somebody that then connected me to the right person that pushed me into this training container that I knew nothing about. And just to give you a little bit more background, so the career that I was telling you about, I was in Las Vegas, and I had been a stripper and a sex worker pretty much since I was 16 years old, and I was 29 years old. And one of the reasons why I was in that industry at all is because I didn't believe that I was smart enough to do anything else. And so my self-worth was really, really struggling, and my health was struggling, everything was struggling. And so I took a bet on myself because these people were different than anybody that I've ever met before. And I went to this event not knowing anything about it. So I fell into this work. It wasn't like, oh, I'm going to be helping people. No, if you even talked to me back then, I would be like, you're freaking crazy. There's no way that I could possibly be helping people. I just need to help myself. And in that event, I was, just to give you context, I was taking Xanax, Adderall, Oxycontins, Loratab, smoking meth, and drinking about a fifth a day. And I was using in the training container. I thought I was hiding it, but I'm sure that they knew that there was a lot going on underneath the hood. And in that event, I cut everything out cold turkey because of the work that was so powerful. I was able to shift myself to let go of the years and years of abuse and trauma that I chose to put myself in. I was able to see the possibility that I actually was worthy and that I could read and write and that I could actually have a life of my dreams. I started to see the possibility. Now, there's a whole story and all that stuff of how that actually became where I am now today. A year later, I met my husband in the training container. And then we ended up, after I did my own healing work, I decided that I want to do this for a living because one of my main missions in life is to show people what's possible when they have the right tools, the right support system to create the life that they want and actually create a business that makes impact. And so the business piece actually came along later because after clearing out the stuff, a lot of these business owners, as well as coaches, and we see this in the health industry as well as doctors and practitioners, is that there's another spiritual journey that happens when you become a business owner. And there's challenges you've never dealt with before. There's identity issues that you've never dealt with. Sales, marketing, money stuff comes up. And so it's a whole spiritual journey in itself. And so that's how it, after I did my own healing and I supported B2C, where people were getting radical shifts. We still do work with people just purely for personal growth and development. But then it also morphed into how can we get this type of information, people that are like yourself, that are doing great work in the world, helping them to optimize first and foremost their mindset, their body intelligence, and their habits to create success. But then how can we put that into the business container so they can put the gas pedal on and really wake people up and make a difference in the world? And so in a long version, that's how I got into it.
No, that is such an amazing story. And like, I just want to recap for people. So not only were you dealing with, you know, the chemical stuff that we all often try to hide from our struggles with, but in that you were actually able to shift your own brain chemistry just from some of the techniques that you were talking about. And, you know, I want to remind people, like, there's lots of different kinds of addictions, right? And so she was talking more about like chemical oriented ones. There's alcohol for people, which I think is really not talked about enough as basically a chemical addiction and a way to hide from things. Even like sitting and watching TV, right? Like TV is its own chemical addiction. It creates the same dopamine pathways as a lot of other things, or whatever it is in your life that you turn to as this kind of just this need that you have to feel like you're filling something. But I know that some of the techniques that you're talking about is a way to explore, like, what is it that you're trying to fill, so that you can actually really discover what it is that's underneath the surface for you. And for anyone who's not familiar with like the terms B2C, she's talking about like business to consumer. So that means like doing direct one-on-one coaching. But I know now yourself and Brandon, your partner, are more using Yager training to really access businesses and entrepreneurs and thought leaders and people wanting to shift the world. And you work with, you know, $1 million companies and high performance people. So I love this story of transformation that you've had. I think it's incredibly powerful. So in this discovery and, you know, what you, because you've worked with a ton of different people at this point, what are some of the really common or biggest belief structures and patterns that you see really holding people back that are, you know, some of the ones you work with and have the biggest transformations with?
Yeah, so overall arching thing that I see a lot is that it's impossibility versus possibility. And it really goes back to the programming and the self-worth issue. And it's really interesting, especially in the high performance field, is that a lot of times people will actually create wealth, massive success, because at the core level, there's some sort of void that they're trying to fill, which then creates tremendous motivation, tremendous drive, tremendous focus that creates amazing success. However, if that is not dealt with, eventually what will happen for that individual is they'll create massive success, but then everything else in their life will fall apart, like their health, which will be burnout, or relationships will fall apart, or they'll attract a business partner that is, you know, something of their background, maybe mom, dad, caretaker, that archetype that then will pull everything apart. So they have to, they will be universally forced to look at the shadow, right? So that's another thing that we see with the high performers. And then there's a lot of people that are debilitated, right, from the self-worth issue. So they never launch. They have perfectionism. They have trouble letting go of control. We see this in high performers too. And it morphs into a way of not taking action, not going after their dreams because they feel at the unconscious level they're not worthy of success. Right. And so we see that split in society, and then it shows up in the business container. It shows up in the love container. It shows up in, you know, the relationship, the family dynamic container. It shows up in the money stuff. It shows up in being able to sell what you do. And then and we also see one of the biggest things in the business container that hold a lot of people back is the leadership side of business ownership, as well as the sales stuff. We find a lot of business owners reject at the unconscious level selling. And so that's like that program that's sabotaging their success and also attacking their nervous system. And then the money shit. If you live in this world, most likely you have some sort of money block that you're not aware of that's putting a glass ceiling on your success. And that also takes your nervous system down, and it doesn't allow you to optimize your health and your performance overall of a long period of time. And so that will be a sabotaging factor.
I think this idea of business being one of the most spiritual things you'll ever do is really not talked about enough, because people forget that when you're starting a business and a brand, like what it is basically you having to communicate what you believe in most strongly, which also means that you have to figure out what that is. And I think a lot of people struggle with it, and they just kind of go through the motions of like what it means to start a business, and they're not connected to it, or they can't figure out a way to communicate it because they haven't connected to what's most passionate for them. And then that goes back to our nervous system health, where it's like, if you're just doing these things and you're not connected to it, it can be really stressful. And if you're in that stressful place, you go into this cycle of your creative brain not working, and then you can't get out the creative things that you need to make it successful, and then you get more stressed about it not being successful, and you keep going in this cycle. So some of these processes that you guys use, like NLP, and I'll let you kind of speak to some of the other tools, but it's a way of literally starting to reprogram beliefs and reprogram, I guess we can call them traumas in the mind. And people, they think of traumas as like some huge life event. And they're like, well, I haven't been through, a genocide, so I haven't experienced trauma. True. But also, I think one of the best definitions of trauma is any state where you feel helpless. Mm-hmm. If your nervous system is in a state where you feel helpless or like a victim, then that is essentially, it can create a little bit of a trauma reaction. And if you have past life events that really color that, then it can emphasize it more for one person than another, which is why people can have completely different outcomes from going through the same experience. So with like where some of these limiting beliefs come from, either like coming from a past trauma, or even the limiting belief in itself almost creating a traumatic response where you get stuck in this cycle, and then eventually leading to burnout because your nervous system is in this kind of traumatized state, like that takes so much energy from our life and from our creative expression and from what we're trying to put into our business or put into our leadership. Like, how do you view all of that within the work that you do?
Yeah, I mean, we're looking at it from a multifaceted approach, because it could be something that, just growing up in the environment, like for an example, mom and dad used to fight over money. That could be then installation for one person as trauma around money. For some people, it could just simply be a belief system that, relationships are tied to money. Therefore, money is bad because it destroys relationships. And so if that's going on underneath the hood, then that would sabotage that person making money. And then we also see, these are one-time events, like maybe a kid experiences divorce, or maybe they have genealogical, this is what we work with the timeline. So we've gone back on ancestral timeline where they did experience some sort of genocide, or maybe they were settlers here in America and they went through great poverty, right?
Epigenetic transference of trauma is a thing.
Yeah, and it gets passed down, and we all, and most of us, our family members have sat us down and said, oh, by the way, let me tell you about all the diseases we have and all the money stories we have and all the relationship stories that we have that are usually negative, right? And so then that's passed down through the oral interpretation. And so that's installed that way, but it's also, from our perspective, passed down through epigenetics. And then we also have the past life thing. So maybe in a past life, somebody took a vow of poverty, right? Or maybe they had an incident where they got killed over money. And so then that's passed down. And so all of that. And then you have also this lifetime, the circus feedback loop of drama. Like for an example, we had a gentleman that grew up with an entrepreneur father. He ended up losing everything. So when he was 7 years old, they had to pack up the station wagon. The IRS took everything. And so he had this thing where he would work so very hard to protect himself, to have financial stability, but then he would continue to lose it over and over and over again. And so that was a pattern, that was a one-time event. Or you could just have dramas of even in college, right, around money, and a passing thing happens on the TV. We've seen so many people have belief systems around their capabilities of confidence, what they can have in their life, as well as money. Everything has been installed by programming of TV and social media. So it could just be something that's on in the background, and then your dear unconscious mind is taking it in as a suggestion that creates a belief system. And so it comes from all different places. And so the really cool thing is once you get into the trance space, where the person is relaxed and communicating to the body intelligence and their higher spirit source, whatever they want to call it, all of that starts unraveling and communicating, because your body intelligence and source energy wants you to release it. And that's why the pattern keeps coming up over and over and over again, different faces, different names, kind of like my relationship pattern, because I was trying to get the learning, except for I was not programmed. The conscious part of me was not educated to recognize that the reason why it keeps showing up is because I have not cleared it yet. And so instead of just pushing it underneath the rug, or trying to conscious mind change the pattern, which I totally believe in changing habits, really becoming aware of our habits and changing them. However, if you don't get to the root of it, it's still going to persist, because it's actually damaging the cellular part of your body. It is damaging it over time. Having negative emotions in these stories, as you know, is damaging to the body and the nervous system over time. And so that's why it keeps showing up. And so in the space that we work in is that we're not only changing the conscious habits, where we're also going to the deep unconscious and clearing out the stuff and moving through those things and getting it at the root.
There's so many different techniques that can address this, and I'm so glad that you brought up like the conscious mind versus the subconscious mind, because people forget that our conscious mind is 5% of your brain, and your subconscious mind is 95% of your brain. So when we can understand that really this like 95% of our brain is running our lives and we have to be able to address it, this is when we can start to tap into other techniques like NLP, or I do some techniques in my own practice as well, stuff like Psych K, and it's a way of really finding the belief that's holding you back and transmuting it and transforming it in some way, because this can come from a very normal scenario, right? Like let's say you are 5 years old and you're at the store with your parents and you really want a toy, and your parent rightfully says, "I'm sorry, sweetie, that's too expensive, you can't have it." That's a very okay thing for a parent to say. They have zero bad intention whatsoever. It's not abusive, it's not anything wrong, but in the child's mind, depending on that particular person, it can imprint as, "I will never have enough money, I will never be able to afford things that I want, or I don't deserve them." Or maybe it's an argument and the parent's like, "You didn't do your chores this morning, so you don't get that thing." And then all of a sudden it's this subconscious imprinting from under age 6 of, "I am not deserving of that."
Yep.
And when we can start to realize that these things happen, not necessarily from like you were wronged, but it was just like how your nervous system interpreted the situation. If we can switch how your nervous system perceives that, all of a sudden you can have this massive amount of energy unlock in your life. And I like that you guys go a little bit deeper and touch on some of the more like energetic, esoteric concepts, because when we start to talk about health and the nervous system and all these concepts, and you're just talking about emotions, like gunking up your health, it's true. There's a whole book about emotions called The Molecules of Emotion, and it's basically a book about how emotions are proteins and peptides inside of our body, and this is how we experience them on a neurochemical level. If those emotions are not felt and they are repressed, it's like having gravel in a grandfather clock. Like it still works, but it makes the gears grind wrong. It starts to really wear down on the system. And then we wonder why 5 to 10 years later, we have an autoimmune disease, or we have an outbreak of cancer, or we have some other kind of disease, or we're just like completely burnt out because we're not connected to ourselves. And also when we're in this state of operating not optimally from this, gravel that's floating around in our system of emotional debris or subconscious beliefs that we're not aware of, so we're living in this kind of fight or flight state, it just drains the entire system and it prevents your brain from working in a whole brain state. You basically are working from like one hemisphere or the other, which is what concepts like NLP and Psych K help with, is they help you actually start to integrate processes from a whole brain state. So in that, like, I mean, I just kind of described like my perception of how this is connected to disease, but what's your guys' perception on how these things can truly affect your health in a detrimental way?
Yeah, we don't necessarily work as high performance coaches. I have worked with people that have symptomology. However, every single person that I work with has symptomology. So it's not something that I focus on per se. And I think it's really freaking incredible when you're doing something like a high performance breakthrough in the context of business, and all of a sudden the thyroid clears up. Or you notice that somebody is having, for an example, a UTI, and maybe there's a boundaries issue. And so that we know in the work that you do, the body keeps a score. And so when we have people come out of our container, they're like, oh my gosh, I just got my blood work and it's completely shifted and changed. And so I think of it as a metaphor, and we're looking at it from the emotional epigenetic traumas that then cause the body to function a certain way. And I don't look at dis-ease is necessarily bad. From my perspective, it's actually a healing phase. We just labeled it as something as bad, versus this is what your body does in order to recalibrate and get back into homeostasis. And so, for an example, with the thyroid, a lot of women are struggling with thyroid stuff. And in our world, it's because they're not able to speak their truth, or they're swallowing something that they do not want to swallow, or they feel powerless in their life. Or a lot of times with ovaries, has to do with profound loss conflict. Or we find a lot of women that have cervical cancer. A lot of times they have been in a situation where they feel like they were abused down there. So it's just all connected. And I think it's fascinating, because one of the biggest things that takes high performers out is then having a health crisis. And so knowing this about
identity
your body,
crisis.
yeah, right. Because and this even happened to me after 2022. We had one of the roughest years that we've had as business owners and as people. My brother passed away. It was a shock. He overdosed on fentanyl. And then there was a chain of events that just kept happening. Like, we lost our dogs, Brandon lost his father. We had some really explosive things happen in our business. And it was all these things happening at once, where we were processing as fast as we possibly could, but then another thing would happen. And that sometimes happens in your life. If you're lucky, you have those experiences because it allows you to grow. We grow from adversity. However, the body does show up. And so when I got my labs done at the beginning of the year, after that long year of traumas and dramas that we were navigating through, my thyroid was struggling, because there was areas of my life I was not legally allowed to speak my truth. And so my thyroid was pissed off at me. I had stuff going on with my liver, which is connected a lot of times to anger, or not being able, or feel like you're starving. My kidneys were struggling because I felt like I was ostracized from the group. So a lot of times kidneys can be connected to feeling like you're getting pushed out, or a refugee, as you know. So all these different things. And I was like, yeah, this is really incredible. I get to see all of this real time instead of freaking out and being upset about it. I now know what to do for the mental, emotional, and then getting with somebody that's going to help me with the protocols and doing biohacking and everything else to make sure that I'm giving my body everything it needs to rest and get back on track. And so I think it's so fascinating how powerful our consciousness and our bodies are, and it's telling us exactly what we need to do.
Yep. And all the concepts that she's talking about for organs being connected to emotions, these are Eastern medicine concepts that are thousands and thousands of years old. They've been around a very long time. And there's another technique I do called like neuroemotional technique. And it's really cool because you can actually like have someone touch the organ, and then you can use muscle testing, which is a way of like basically treating the body like a circuit board to figure out like what emotion is connected to that. And you can kind of enter in through an organ, which is a really fascinating thing to see. And then you can even see if it's connected to a memory and all these different things. So emotions are not separate from health. And I talk about this all the time. Like, we have different kinds of injuries. We have physical injury, chemical injury, but we also have emotional injury. If you're going through grief, or you're going through sadness or anger or something like that, or you feel like you've been emotionally attacked, that can create an inflammatory response in your body, incredibly similar to getting in a car accident or breaking your leg. And if we can start to understand these things and how to work with them, and then we're working first and foremost, most importantly, with the mind and the signals that we're actually sending to our cells, that is how people like those who have gone to the workshops of Dr. Joe Dispenza and completely healed their cancer or completely healed their autoimmune through meditation. These are the kind of concepts that we're working with, is they change the signals that their nervous system is sending to the rest of their body. And I had a question come in. Someone said, this is all coming from a neurotypical perspective, add in neurodivergence, and it complicates everything further. I'm going to present an idea that I like, that I think helps to empower people, because one of my issues with how we've diagnosed things and now, we label something as neurodivergent is it makes people feel like they have a label and like they are a victim to something that's a disease within themselves, versus understanding that we are all neurodivergent in our own way, and learning how to truly work with your mind rather than label it as something that's off normal. That is the key to working with this stuff, because every single person's brain is different. Every single person's experience of life is different. Every person's neurochemistry is different, which is why you can't just go to a practitioner and go on some protocol and have it work for everybody. You have to address the case entirely differently and do this internal emotional work that you're talking about. So just as like a side question, have you had any clients that would have classified themselves as neurodivergent that you've worked with, that you've seen massive amounts of success with?
Yeah, so we've had people come in with all kinds of diagnoses, and then they leave those diagnoses behind because that is just a reading of one person's interpretation of what's going on. I mean, I was labeled so many different ways. I mean, learning disabled, ADHD, I was labeled as having bipolar, all these different things. And I truly believe we're not our labels. And there's so many different things that cause that type of behavior or that type of thinking or that type of health or dis-ease. And so I stay away from the labels because I know it's also static, right? Health is static, our life is static, and you may show up on even if when you're taking your blood work, that is just a snapshot for that day. What happens in somebody's blood work if they just had a shock? It would be a completely different lab reading than later on after they've done the trauma release work. And so I like to not put people in boxes, especially myself. And looking at, us as human beings as being multifaceted, and it doesn't necessarily just have to do with the mind, it's also the energy. The energy is a huge piece of the puzzle, and the bioenergetics and all these different things that create what we are as this human experience. And so I've seen people rewrite stories around all different things, whether it be mental health or physical health diagnoses.
Absolutely. And I think, yeah, you said it very well. It's like rewriting it. And I had someone like, love that perspective on neurodivergence, takes the stigma out of the label. And I think when we deal with these labels, it allows us to enter a state that is emotionally easier, because then we can pass the responsibility off to something outside of us, versus we can take the more challenging but more productive road of realizing like we are way more in control of our lives and our health than we realize. So I know that these are some of the concepts and skills that you guys teach in your work. Like, what are some of the best things people can do to overcome what we're talking about and, really stop living by a story that they're telling themselves and start to engage with their reality in a way that is a lot more forward momentum?
Well, the first start is being aware, right? Because when you're actually aware or slowing things down and realizing the stories that you're telling yourself, that gives you the power to change it. And know that there is the tools. There are tools. You have the capacity to rewrite your story. I personally have rewritten my story about myself thousands and thousands and thousands, and I will continue. I'm still learning and growing, and just know that because I've done all this work doesn't mean that I'm better than anyone. I'm on a journey. I have my own shit. I'm working on
a journey than a destination.
Yeah, this is why I truly believe from an esoteric spiritual thing is that we're here to do that. We're here to self-discover. And finding a place that you resonate, maybe working with yourself, Dr. Christine, or, coming to a container where you have people that have the tools to show you how to do it yourself. One of the things that I'm really excited about is that I don't do work to people anymore. I teach them how to do it with themselves so they can be empowered and being in a full immersive environment. So for me personally, I needed to get out of my environment. I needed to go somewhere else that I could be around people that have a different belief system, that had that shine the light on how amazing I was, and didn't listen to my limitations, and to rewrite the stories and also imprint new patterns and behaviors inside the container. And that's one of the things that we do. We have a 4-day event where we get people out of their environment, and we teach them the tools of optimizing their emotional health as well as their mental health and their behavioral health and habitual health. And part of that is repatterning how you wake up in the morning, what you do when you wake up in the morning, how you meditate and how you set goals, and then how do you clear and figure out what's holding you back from being the best version of yourself, and how to rewrite that story from the deep unconscious level, and then what actions you need to take every single day in order for you to move the needle. Because you can have this amazing experience at a Tony Robbins event, yes, and you're a completely different person. However, if you don't integrate it back into your world, back into your environment, a lot of people end up going back to the way they were. And so having the experience, getting the tools, being around people, repatterning it, but then also going back into the environment of your life and re-anchoring everything in your life to the new way of being, doing, and having. And so that's what we do in our containers. And there's so many different services that do very similar stuff like this. And so finding something that resonates with you, that you're willing to get out of your comfort zone and fully immerse in something.
Well, and I think retreats and creating a space and a container for people to come into where not only are you leaving behind your old patterns, which means that you're kind of scrambling like the autopilot you live your life
Yes.
on, and then you're coming into this new space where not only are you participating in a new thing, you're building new neural pathways, but you're marinating in this new energy, which is also a form of like frequency shift, right? And that starts to affect our epigenetics on a frequency level. And so if you can exist in this environment, form new neural patterns, really imprint them, it's like physical therapy for your brain and the way that you think about the world. And sometimes you don't even realize that you've been thinking about the world in an incredibly negative way. And so if you can start to re-imprint these patterns where you actually create space and a new neural network, and then you basically practice it. Again, it's like PT for your brain, but when you go home, you have to keep doing it, which is why I really like the way that you guys teach, because I've participated in some of your workshops before, and they're wonderful. And you guys also do this thing where you will create like co-created meditations to get people's brain into like an alpha and trance state, so that when you are trying to reprogram the belief of your choice, your brain is actually in a state where you can receive it and you can rewire it. Because if you're trying to rewire yourself when you're in your pattern of kind of fight or flight, a little bit of like beta brain waves, your brain, you don't actually remember. You can't imprint new memories. You can't build new neural networks. We can really only do that when we're in certain brain states. So we have to create the time and the space to do that while learning the tools that you guys teach that you can then take home, so you can do your physical therapy for your brain at home. Because otherwise, like you said, you have a great experience, you go home and it just kind of like slowly evaporates. But on your retreats, I know you mentioned biohacking and some other things. What are some of the other tools that you guys really implement in the retreats, and just things that you want people to know to see if it would really resonate with them? Because I think you guys are kind of unique in the way you approach stuff.
Yeah, so we integrate with meditation in the morning, breath work, movement. We also do cold plunges, and you don't necessarily need an expensive tank. We have a cold plunge that is outside that we have to break the ice off every single morning. So it's everything about shifting your nervous system into parasympathetic, so then it's prepared and ready in order to do this deep dive work. And then part of it is actually learning how to do it with yourself, but then also learning how to do it with others. I really truly believe there's something that's massive healing that happens when you actually facilitate others' change. And then it also gives you self-sustainability outside of the container. And so basically the 4 days is being in complete hypnosis. So you're rewiring these stories, and there's the group container. So there's something so fabulous about the group containers, because other people in the container are going to trigger you. They will show you areas of shadow, and they're also going to inspire you, and they're also going to hold you accountable. And the deep friendships that you have in this container will then translate to later on. And a lot of our clients, they end up continue to stay together and hold each other accountable, because it's a community building thing, because you're going into this full immersion. You get into relationships and friendships that are so deep, and they're at that soul level bond. And so having that all together as one in the container, we just seen magnificent results. And then the other piece is, how do you put it together and apply it to your business? Some of the people that come aren't necessarily in business. They're just coming for purely personal growth and development. They're high performers. They want to reset their nervous system, and they want to get tools to be better leaders. And there's a lot of our clients are also business. So then what are we going to do next in your journey as a high performer? So what are the next steps, and what's the action plan? And then also with business, how can you apply it to your business to then make more impact, and to help more lives, essentially?
I love that. That's perfect. I was going to ask, like, who is this for? But essentially, people wanting to perform at a high level. And, that could even be leadership as being a parent. It could be leadership in your business. It could be leadership in your community. And I love that when people leave the retreat, they have a community. That's one of the reasons I've started running more group programs. Is community, I think, is one of the things that we are needing most in our world right now, because we're more connected than ever through technology. But it also means that we're actually more disconnected than ever, because unless you really make an effort for it, we don't necessarily get the community out of it. You feel like you're in community because you're like watching someone's social feed for a year without actually talking to them. But then you realize that you haven't actually connected with them. And so, out of these, it's like sometimes people will even follow up with each other in little groups. And I really like that concept, because we all need support, and it's okay. And never will you be able to pull yourself forward faster than when you're interacting with people who are already a few steps ahead and are helping to pull you forward and push you forward, rather than pulling you back, which is what our old patterns tend to do.
Yeah.
So are there like any other concepts that you just wish people knew, that you just really want to share with people?
I think one of the things that is my big thing is that you're enough. How you are now. How you are now, you don't need to change anything. You don't need to do anything different. That you right now are enough. You are worthy of everything your heart desires. And all that shame construct that's been impressed upon us, and the self-judgment, and you have to be this in order to then have this, or to be good enough to then have these things that you desire, that's all bullshit. And it's been created in such a beautiful design for us to grow and transform as humans. And at the end of the day, when you can truly, truly embody self-worth and self-love, everything will change for you. And if you're showing up on this call and you feel like there's areas of your life where you really struggle with feeling like you're enough, or being kind to yourself and loving on yourself, and knowing that there's nothing more that you need to do to change or fix or anything like that, that you are just it right now, just know that you're on the path. And just because you're showing up today, it means that it's all going to start falling into place. I truly believe right now what's happening energetically is spiritual transformation. And I've noticed this with people that I've been coaching and training, is that their shadow is in their face, and they feel like it's really overwhelming. They're like, stuff I've been working on is keeps resurfacing. And I say, and that's why we're here. All this stuff is coming up for a reason. It's coming up for a reason, so that we can fully embody the superhuman that we are, with complete heart energy and love energy and abundance energy, so then we can lead people through the times we're about to face, which is going to be some of the most incredible times to be living.
Yes. This is definitely a time where we need people to embrace their leadership and their personal confidence and their ability to think critically and think for themselves, so that we can help create stronger forces as a tribe and as community. So if people were interested in doing this with you, where would you direct them to go to kind of learn more about it?
So check me out on Instagram. It's Deborah Yager. And then underneath where the link is, it has a Calendly link. And if you're interested in connecting, talking, I just love connecting with amazing humans. I would love to meet you. And if you are interested in working with us, we can share what that looks like. We have a couple spots left for our Utah event that's coming up at the end of this month. And I would love to see you there if it's something of interest. If not, that's totally fine. I would love to collaborate and connect at a deeper level.
And I think you said you have another one in June too, right? If this one's a little too soon for people.
Yeah, so we have one coming up in June. I think it's the weekend of the 12th. And that's on our website as too. So you can find our website on my social media platform. Again, it's Deb Yager, at Deb Yager on Instagram.
Fantastic. Yeah. So if anyone's interested, just click her name, send her a message, use the Cleanly link, book a call. She's just wonderful to talk to. And every single time I've ever had anyone speak with them or spoken with them myself, it's so personalized and connected to exactly what you need and what's going on in your life. So definitely recommend just checking it out. And, you know, if you're just in the place of listening and learning about this stuff, follow them on Instagram, sign up for their email list. They're always sending out like cool little just mindset shifts and tricks. And I think that's really the key, is just starting to learn how to really truly work with your own mind, because then it's sustainable and it's not something that you have to go refill. It's something that you learn how to refill yourself. So thank you so much for taking the time to do this and just kind of sharing some of your wisdom with people. Any last thoughts you want to share?
Yeah, take action on your dreams.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Dream about it all day, but until you take those initial steps, it's just a dream. So thank you. And yeah, anyone with any questions, reach out, feel free to comment below, and we'll be answering comments. I'll repost this on my feed, and we just do this for you guys. So let us know what you want to learn, and we can always do another one. So Thank you for taking time this morning. It was so nice to see you.
I appreciate you so much. And thank you so much, community. I am sending you so much love right now. Bye.
Absolutely. Have a great day.